My parents claimed they needed my help, but they were hiding a shocking secret. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for the past year, I've been sending money to my parents every month. They're in their early 50s, and the story they've been telling me is that they're struggling with bills. My dad lost his job, and my mom has some sort of autoimmune disorder that makes it hard for her to work. They've always been proud, so when they first asked for help, I didn't even hesitate. Of course, I'd help them out, they're my parents. But now, after more than a year, I'm starting to see things that don't add up. Started small. I've been working 2 jobs, really trying to scrape together whatever I can. I even canceled a vacation I'd been looking forward to for months. I thought this was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But recently, things haven't been sitting right with me. My dad mentioned in passing that he's still golfing every week, something he's been doing for years. I brushed it off at first, but then my mom started talking about some expensive home decor she was eyeing. That's when I started getting suspicious. How are they struggling to pay rent but still have money for hobbies and fancy things? It really hit me when I overheard my parents during a visit. They were in the kitchen, and I was in the living room scrolling through my phone. I wasn't eavesdropping or anything, but their conversation caught my attention. They were talking about getting new furniture. New furniture. The same people who had been telling me they're barely scraping by. My stomach dropped. I didn't say anything at the time, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next time I sent money, I decided to ask them about it. Just something casual like, hey, how's the budget looking? I want to make sure I'm helping enough. My dad laughed it off, saying they deserved a treat every now and then, even in tough times. I wanted to push back, but I felt weird questioning them. They're my parents. Shouldn't I trust them? I talked to one of my friends about it, and she was the first to plant the idea that maybe, just maybe, my parents weren't being completely honest with me. She suggested they might be manipulating me. First, I couldn't believe it. Who does that to their own kid? But the more I thought about it, the more things started to click. My parents never talked about how they were trying to fix their situation. They never mentioned looking into government assistance or getting a part-time job. It was just me sending money month after month. To make things worse, they started asking for more. Every month, it was something new, an extra 100 here for groceries, another couple hundred there for utilities. I'm not swimming in money myself. I've got savings, but it's been shrinking fast, and I'm starting to worry about my own future. I want to buy a house someday, have an emergency fund, but with how things are going, that's starting to look impossible. Then there's my older brother Max. He's 31 and has flat out refused to help them financially. He says they're fine. I've always been closer to our parents, so I didn't think much of his stance before, but now I'm starting to wonder. Does he know something I don't? He's always been more skeptical, not as trusting, but I just can't bring myself to think they'd lie to me. Still, he doesn't seem worried about them at all, and that's sticking with me. A few weeks ago, I visited my parents, like usual. I wasn't looking for anything, but I saw it. Right there on the kitchen counter was a bank statement. I couldn't help myself. I took a quick look. The balance was way higher than what I'd expected from people who were supposedly broke. I didn't confront them about it at the time, but now I can't stop thinking about it. If they're sitting on money, why do they need mine? I'm stuck in this weird place of not knowing what's real anymore. I feel like I should trust my parents, but these little things keep piling up. Every time I send money now, I feel sick to my stomach, like I'm being played. After everything I'd seen and heard, I couldn't ignore the red flags any longer. It was time to confront my parents and figure out what was really going on with their finances. The next time I visited, I asked if we could talk. I kept it casual at first, saying I just wanted to make sure I was helping out where they needed it most. But as soon as I brought up money, their mood shifted. My mom looked surprised, and my dad seemed uncomfortable. They didn't jump at the chance to explain. Instead, they got defensive, like I was accusing them of something. I asked about their expenses. Where was the money I'd been sending going? How much were they really paying for rent, utilities, groceries, and those medical bills they kept mentioning? At first, they danced around the questions, giving vague, evasive answers. My dad mumbled something about bills, and my mom just nodded along, but they didn't offer anything concrete. I pressed harder, asking for real numbers and details. They got flustered. My mom tried to steer the conversation away, talking about how hard things had been for them lately, but I wasn't letting it go this time. Finally, my dad broke down and admitted they hadn't been completely honest. They were using the money I sent not just for bills, but for extras. My mom quickly chimed in, trying to justify it. She said things like, "We deserve a few nice things, even in tough times." That's when the real picture started to come together. As my dad kept talking, it became painfully clear how deep the deception ran. He admitted they'd been spending money on luxuries, new electronics, social club memberships, and even a few home upgrades. My mom said they didn't want to lose face in front of friends and neighbors. Apparently, keeping up appearances was more important than being honest with their son who was working 2 jobs to support them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mom doubled down, saying they still needed my help, especially because of her health. But when I asked to see the medical bills they'd been claiming were piling up, she got evasive. She eventually broke down into tears, saying she couldn't believe her own son would turn against her like this. It felt like emotional blackmail in real time. And then came the final bombshell. My dad confessed they had a decent amount of savings the entire time. They were sitting on a comfortable financial cushion, untouched, while I drained my own finances to help them. His reasoning? It's for our retirement. I stood there, speechless, trying to process it all. I'd been working myself to the bone, sacrificing my own goals and well-being, while they let me believe they were barely scraping by. When I told them I wasn't going to send another dime until they came clean about everything, my mom's tears turned into anger. She accused me of being selfish, ungrateful, and uncaring. But I wasn't budging. I left the house feeling betrayed, furious, and heartbroken all at once. I didn't know what to do next, so I turned to Reddit for advice. I laid everything out. The lies, the confrontation, and my decision to cut off financial support. The responses were overwhelming. Strangers validated my feelings and reminded me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Many shared their own stories of manipulative family dynamics, and for the first time I didn't feel alone. But the fallout from my decision was just beginning. The fallout from my decision to cut off financial support hit almost immediately. My phone started blowing up with texts and calls from them. At first, my mom begged me to reconsider, sending long messages about how I was abandoning my family in their time of need. When the guilt trips didn't work, my dad took a more aggressive approach. He accused me of being ungrateful, selfish, and warned that if I didn't resume helping them, they'd cut me out of their will. Couldn't believe it. After all I had sacrificed, they still thought they could manipulate me into caving. But I held firm. Then, the smear campaign started. Extended family members began reaching out, scolding me for abandoning my parents. My aunt called, saying my parents had been telling everyone that I'd left them destitute and heartbroken. They're saying you just stopped helping them out of nowhere, she said. I calmly explained everything, the lies about their financial situation, the luxuries they were spending on, and how they were sitting on savings the whole time. First, she was shocked. But then came the predictable response. This is family business. You shouldn't be airing it. It felt like I was being painted as the villain for finally standing up for myself. With all the drama swirling around me, I decided I needed to know just how deep the lies went. On a friend's suggestion, I hired a financial investigator to look into my parents' assets. What they uncovered left me speechless. Not only were my parents financially comfortable, but they owned multiple real estate properties I had no idea about. They'd been collecting rental income while claiming they couldn't pay their bills. The investigator also found evidence of a failed business venture they'd kept hidden. Apparently, they'd lost a significant amount of money a few years back and had been using my financial support to cover the gap without dipping into their savings. They weren't just lying. They were outright using me to clean up their financial mess. Armed with the investigator's report, I sent my parents one final email. I detailed everything I'd discovered, the savings, the real estate, the failed business, and demanded an explanation. This time, their response wasn't anger or guilt-tripping. It was silence. No texts, no calls, no letters. It was as if they had finally realized they'd been caught and didn't know how to respond. I updated my Reddit post with everything I'd uncovered. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of strangers validated my decision to cut ties, sharing their own stories of manipulative family members. The support helped me stay grounded, even as I dealt with extended family members who accused me of being too harsh or airing dirty laundry. But for every family member who judged me, there were others who quietly reached out to say they understood. Some even admitted they'd had their own run-ins with my parents' manipulative behavior in the past. A few weeks later, my brother called. He apologized for going quiet and admitted that our parents had been pressuring him to convince me to start sending money again. They don't think they did anything wrong, he said. But I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Hearing that meant a lot. It reminded me I wasn't crazy for setting boundaries, even if it felt like I was standing alone at times.